coming through.
Goldfish. You like some animals? Little guppies? Guinea pigs.
Nothing to be alarmed about. I'll take the hairy little chap.
And the girl next door.
Here I am obsessed by a woman who makes Francie Turner look like some sort of evil slut.
It's all in the bedside manner.
Does this look very unprofessional?
Beast, new comedy from the writer of Men Behaving Badly, starts Thursday at 10 on BBC One.
The riser.
I am a man of purpose.
The rebel.
Just in case you were thinking of throwing something else.
The deceiver.
Will we get our coaches?
You will have everything.
The enemy within.
There is something among us.
How dare you make these demands on me?
No sewer boy will hold Gormenghast to ransom.
What a diabolically clever little monster.
Gormenghast. Begins Monday the 17th of January.
They can't stop me, because now I know.
On BBC Two.
The time has come.
Desperate doings in the dungeon now on BBC One. Sounds like Fern. And you can find more saucy comedy on the menu at René's Cafe with 3 classic episodes of 'Allo 'Allo, available now on BBC Video.
No gimmicks,
This is the answer to the cook's prayer.
no celebrities,
All these things are so important for getting flavour into your cooking.
no hysteria,
The kind of things that you need if you want to have a lifetime of interesting dishes.
just Delia.
Just pure, simple ingredients.
Join Delia Smith for part 2 of How to Cook. Tomorrow at 8:30 on BBC Two.
The temperature's soaring, the scenery's wonderful, and the food is delicious. So what's missing?
No holiday romance.
When you book with Janus Holidays, everything is included.
Footballers make great lovers.
The Janus reps will do anything to make your stay an unforgettable one.
So we're on top of everything then? Some of us more than others.
Pity you've got a rule about your clients.
Like you said, you're not a client.
Take a break with the Sunburn team, coming in January to BBC One.
At Home with the Cactus and Glenn Campbell. Steve Chalks in Arizona for Songs of Praise on BBC One in 25 minutes. The BBC News now on BBC One with Sian Williams.
The flu outbreak, the chief medical officer says it's now an epidemic. The government says the NHS can cope. Doctors say hospitals are struggling. Scud missile parts bound for Libya found at Gatwick. And after that defeat, Sir Alex Ferguson says we were right to take part. Good evening. The government's chief medical officer says the number of people suffering from flu is the highest for a decade, and it's going to get worse. Professor Liam Donaldson says the scale of the problem had been underestimated because so many people avoided going to their doctor. But the British Medical Association says the government's using the outbreak as an excuse to mask the chronic underfunding in the NHS.
I'm just going to tell the nurses they're coming on the late shift.
It's no surprise to hospital staff that the flu outbreak is approaching epidemic levels. Nurses in accident and emergency at University College Hospital in London say they've been close to breaking point for weeks. They say the flu has just added to pressure on services already overstretched.
The sheer volume of workload is overwhelming at times, and it's very difficult to be able to make sure that everybody's prioritising correctly and assessing to a competent level when you haven't hardly got time to even think.
Today, the government sought to reassure people the NHS is coping, although it now says official figures underestimated the scale of the flu outbreak, which it believes is the worst for 10 years.
The official figures probably under-record the true level of the flu. I think that's borne out by people's own experiences. There can hardly be a family in the land that hasn't been hit by the flu, and certainly everybody knows somebody that's had it, and they will also know that it's a particularly nasty virus.
The government says thousands of people with flu called the new NHS Direct helpline rather than going to GPs who collect flu data, masking the true size of the outbreak. Figures out last week estimate in England 144 people per 100,000 had the virus. But the chief medical officer believes the real number is twice that, 300 per 100,000 and rising, approaching the official epidemic level. There's a similar picture in Wales and Scotland, where Aberdeen Royal Infirmary had their busiest week ever for medical admissions. But doctors' leaders say it's too simplistic just to blame the flu for the NHS's problems.
Flu is not the only cause of the strain the NHS is under. The government is, to an extent, using it as an excuse, but it's a real excuse. It is part of the problem. But underneath it, there are endemic problems of lack of beds, lack of nurses, lack of intensive care facilities in the NHS that do need to be addressed.
There are signs that pressure is beginning to ease, with more intensive care beds becoming available. But once again, a winter flu outbreak has raised serious questions about how well the NHS can cope. James Westhead, BBC News at University College Hospital in London.
The Foreign Secretary Robin Cook says Britain will protest to the Libyan government over the seizure at Gatwick Airport of Scud missile parts bound for Tripoli. Customs and excise officers discovered them in late November disguised as car parts. Britain recently restored diplomatic ties with Libya, but an arms embargo remains in force.
The missile parts were discovered at Gatwick Airport last November on a flight bound for the Libyan capital Tripoli. One newspaper report says they were packed into crates marked as vehicle spares. Customs officials just say their investigations are continuing. Scud missiles are long-distance weapons. Libya is believed to have up to 100 launchers. At present, their range is 200 miles, but it's suggested the parts at Gatwick would have trebled that distance, making them capable of reaching southern Europe. The seizure has brought strong words from the Foreign Secretary Robin Cook. He's ordered Britain's ambassador in Tripoli to give a firm message to the Libyan government that trade through Britain can't be used to break the international arms embargo against them. The shooting of policewoman Yvonne Fletcher in 1984 outside the Libyan embassy in London resulted in a 15-year break in diplomatic relations between Britain and Libya. Links were restored only last July after the handing over of 2 Libyan suspects to stand trial for the Lockerbie bombing. But the discovery of the missile parts at Gatwick has reinforced Britain's continuing concern about the military ambitions of the Libyan regime. Valerie Jones, BBC News.
The disgraced former Conservative Minister Jonathan Aitken used his second full day of freedom from jail to attend church with his family near their London home. The former MP left prison on Friday after serving less than half an 18-month jail sentence for perjury and perverting the course of justice. There's been renewed fighting in Chechnya, bringing an end to the lull of recent days. Latest reports speak of Chechen rebels having broken through Russian lines in 2 towns close to the capital Grozny. Our correspondent Robert Parsons has been to Gudamesh, Chechnya's second city, which remains firmly under Russian control.
A third day of relative calm over Grozny. Russia's suspension of its bombardment of the Chechen capital is holding up, after a fashion. The temporary respite has given the terrified inhabitants of the city a chance to catch their breath, and in some cases to leave. Russia says it's still keeping open a safe corridor for civilians. The lull in the fighting around Grozny has given the Russian army a chance to regroup and concentrate its attention on the mountains, the stronghold of rebel resistance. The Russians are using their numerical advantage to tie the Chechens down on several fronts, and say they have severed the rebels' supply lines. But just as important a battle is going on behind the front lines in Gudermes, Chechnya's second largest city and the possible future capital of the republic. It's a battle for hearts and minds. Chechnya's leading Muslim cleric was once a supporter of independence. Since the arrival of the Russian troops in Gudermes, he says, life has begun to feel normal. Schools have been repaired and the electricity and gas supplies switched back on. The next stage, say the pro-Russian Chechens, is to establish Moscow as the sole center of power in Chechnya. That, though, depends on Russian forces establishing control throughout Chechnya. For the moment, even here, Russian command is only partial. At night, Chechen fighters still have the freedom of the surrounding countryside. Robert Parsons, BBC News, Gudermes, Chechnya.
The Chancellor, Gordon Brown, has denied any impropriety over his purchase of a flat in Westminster 8 years ago. The Conservatives have called for an inquiry into the purchase because the flat was bought from a failed company of the late newspaper tycoon Robert Maxwell, of which Geoffrey Robinson was a former director. But this afternoon, the administrators of the sale said the flat was advertised and more than one offer was made to buy it before Mr. Brown's purchase went ahead. They added that Mr. Brown had not received any special treatment. The Department of Health has issued a warning about 2 brands of pâté after 2 people died of suspected food poisoning in France. The products affected are 2 different kinds of pork-based pâté, one called Gruyère, the other langoutine. Anyone who may have brought them home from the continent is now advised to throw them away. The teenage Buddhist Lama who's fled from Chinese-ruled Tibet to India has been taken to a secret location after making his first public appearance. The 14-year-old Karmapa Lama escaped from his monastery near Tibet's capital Lhasa, telling guards he was going to a hilltop retreat. He then travelled for 8 days across the frozen Himalayas to reach Dharamshala, the headquarters of the Dalai Lama.
Before dawn today, the young Lama who's escaped from Tibet is being compared to the Dalai Lama's 41 years ago, moves on to a new place of refuge. The official word is that they want him to recover from his arduous secret journey across the Himalayas in a quieter place.
Our immediate concern is about his health. It's winter time, and there are many difficult, passes and high places they had to come through. So it must have been a very, very, very difficult and traumatic experience because to travel under these circumstances.
In fact, his guards have ensured that the public have had only glimpses of him. But to have the 3rd highest ranking Lama in their midst and China's religious policy in Tibet in disarray is enough for most people here.
No, it's a major embarrassment for China. So I'm happy. It's a big win for us.
They call this place Little Tibet. It seems to have been taken completely unawares by the Karmapa's arrival. That goes not just for the Tibetan refugees here, but even for the Dalai Lama himself. Dharamshala is evidently pleased to have the Karmapa here as another young Lama who can be tutored to keep the flame of Buddhism alive in Tibet. But India has been put on the spot because of the always delicate relationship between India and China. In these circumstances, the Karmapa may remain out of public gaze for a while. He is now installed in a setting apparently more in keeping with his ranking while his future is discussed. A 14-year-old who may have stirred a religious and diplomatic tug of war. Mike Wooldridge, BBC News, Dharamshala.
Now sport, and in this afternoon's FA Cup 4th round ties, the Premiership leaders Leeds United won an exciting match at First Division Manchester City by 5 goals to 2, while Arsenal and Leicester are currently drawing 0-0 at Highbury.
Late arrivals at Main Road missed the start of 20 minutes frenetic activity with Sean Goater's header in the 2nd minute. Referee and assistant both apparently failed to spot the 2 City players offside. Leeds weren't too bothered though. Ian Hart's header was deflected in by Bacca almost immediately. Confirmation that this was going to be a vintage FA Cup offering came with Ian Bishop's goal to put Manchester City ahead again. But Bishop's inspired strike, too much even for the England keeper Nigel Martyn, was cancelled out by further carelessness in the City defence. They again failed to deal with Hart's header and Smith applied the finishing touch. Class then began to tell, and Leeds' superiority in an enthralling first half was underlined with a quality move and a goal from Harry Kewell. Leeds drove the point home in the 2nd half with 2 more fine goals, the first from Lee Bowyer. The final contribution came with a 2nd for Kewell, with Leeds worthy 5-2 winners.
Number 5 for Leeds United.
The other 4th round tie of the afternoon between Arsenal and Leicester has so far looked pale by comparison. Arsenal had the best chances of the first half, but neither side was able to break the deadlock. Neil Bennett, BBC News.
The Manchester United manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, says he doesn't regret taking part in the World Club Championship, despite his team's defeat last night. United withdrew from this year's FA Cup to compete in Brazil, but now have no chance of winning the tournament.
Manchester United have been heavily criticised for their lack of public relations ever since they arrived in Brazil.
Today, the club went some way to redress the balance with a pre-arranged photo session with a group of children from deprived areas of Rio. The players were in good humour despite last night's defeat by Vasco da Gama, and the manager believes the trip has been worthwhile.
Yes, I think it has. I think that it's been good for us to come here and in a different type of culture of games. Refereeing in the first game is unusual for us, but that can happen in these types of tournament. All in all, we're very pleased.
Disastrous defensive errors by Gary Neville presented Romario with 2 goals and wrecked United's hopes of winning the World Club Championship. A 3-1 defeat means Vasco are now virtually assured of a place in Friday's final at the expense of the European champions.
First 2 goals that Romario scored, you know, they weren't the work of Romario, they were the lapse in concentration of myself, and at the end of the day, we've paid for it, the team have paid for it, the club have paid for it, and I've got to live with that.
The emphasis for United now will be to give the younger players a chance to experience a game at the Maracana. Manchester United's visit here has been fraught with problems both on and off the field. They desperately need to make amends in their last group match on Tuesday in the hope at least of reaching the 3rd place playoff. Paul Newman, BBC News in Rio.
In rugby union, there were important victories for 2 English clubs in the Heineken Cup this afternoon. Wasps are almost certain of a place in the quarter-finals after their 49-17 victory over Ulster, while Northampton also beat French club Grenoble. The highlight of their 27-16 victory was this spectacular individual try from winger Ben Cohen just before half-time. The victory means Northampton stay top of their group with 1 round of matches to play. Within the past few minutes, a Norwegian transport spokesman has announced that human error caused the Norwegian train collision, which killed 19 people this week. The spokesman confirmed that one of the drivers involved in Tuesday's disaster went through a red light. Andrew Lloyd Webber is buying one of Britain's most famous theatre groups in a deal estimated worth more than £85 million. His company, the Really Useful Group, is to take control of Stoll Moss, which owns 10 of London's best-known theatres.
Lord Lloyd Webber, composer of hugely successful musicals like Cats and Phantom of the Opera, took to the stage himself this afternoon at Stoll Moss's London Palladium. He already controls 3 London theatres, now he'll have 13. The Stoll Moss chain includes big houses like the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, currently hosting Dancing on Dangerous Ground, and smaller West End theatres, including 4 in a row along Shaftesbury Avenue. The new boss told David Frost he wanted to keep them out of the hands of pen pushers and number crunchers.
Theatre is... The way to make theatre work is not to run it as a business, in a way. And I've been worried, I think a lot of people have been worried, that the group would fall into the hands of people who are, you know, money men and who wouldn't necessarily understand that the thing about theatre is you've got to take risks.
It's the second big theatre deal in the past year. Apollo Leisure, owners of London's Lyceum Theatre and 22 others round the country, was bought by an American company, SFX, last August. Attention now turns to a third company, ACT, which owns 8 London theatres, including this one, the Piccadilly, and is also reportedly up for sale. Commercial West End theatre is risky, which is why it's often said to be in peril. But all this interest in buying and selling the buildings themselves suggests there's plenty of life in it yet. Nick Hyam, BBC News, in London's West End.
And tonight's main news again. The Chief Medical Officer has said the flu outbreak has become a serious epidemic. The government says the NHS can cope, but doctors say hospitals are struggling. And that's it from me. Peter Sissons is going to be here with the late news tonight at 10:30. Have a very good evening. Bye-bye.
Hello there. It was a cold, frosty start, just like this, that greeted us this morning. And for England and Wales, it's going to be the same again tomorrow morning. But further north, there should be some changes on the way. Now, temperatures are falling sharply now under the clear skies. And for England and Wales, there'll be a widespread frost developing. A little bit colder than last night, with temperatures down as low as -3 or -4. Further north for Scotland and Northern Ireland, after an early frost, temperatures will be rising by morning time, with the winds picking up, blowing in cloud and rain. Now, we've had a few wintry showers today. They are dying out, just 1 or 2 continuing in the north in particular, but it's the cloud that's already starting to stream into the northwest. That's the cloud that's heading our way, all due to these weather fronts here ploughing in the cloud and rain into Scotland and Northern Ireland by the morning, whereas further south, nearer the high pressure, it's mist and fog patches by morning here. So for tomorrow then, wet, windy weather soon sweeping in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south for England and Wales, dry, bright, frosty morning on the cards. Sunshine hanging on in good measure in the southeast, but cloud and some rain slipping in to northern England, North Wales in the afternoon. Brighter, showery weather into the far northwest, but again, it's going to be cold. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Botswana.
We catch giraffe, John Wayne style.
This is no safari. This is real life in the bush.
Machine.
Full of surprises.
These people just turn up from nowhere and helps us.
Get closer to nature with Vets in the Wild. Tomorrow at 8:30 on BBC One.
So how will they do against South Melbourne? Manchester United's next game, Tuesday night, live on BBC One at 8 o'clock.
Hello, good evening from News West. The West Country seems to be recovering slightly from the flu. The crisis has put hospitals throughout the region under intense pressure, but tonight officials are saying the problem appears to be contained for the time being.
Here at Frenchay Hospital in Bristol, extra workers have been called in and non-emergency operations have been cancelled. Bosses pay tribute to the way their staff have coped with the extra pressure.
There are a number of our nursing and medical staff, as well as ancillary and support staff, who have become ill. They are off sick. The colleagues who are working on duty are working sometimes additional shifts in order to cover. They're coping admirably.
Managers at hospitals across the region say they've moved quickly to cope with the flu epidemic that swept the country. The crisis in the southwest reached its peak on Friday when it was reported that there was only one intensive care bed available from Land's End to Hampshire. Tonight, the figure stands at 4. But health experts are warning that though the situation appears to have eased, more cases of flu are expected in the next week. Neil Manship, BBC News West, Bristol.
In other news, there's concern tonight for the safety of a 13-month-old boy who police say has been abducted by his father in Bristol for the second time in just a few months. Christopher Elson was staying with foster parents in Whitchurch yesterday when he was taken without permission by his teenaged father, who did the same thing last October. Andrew Elson, who's 18, doesn't know that his son has a chest infection and needs medicine. Police are appealing for him to get in touch urgently. A murder inquiry is underway at Kingswood near Bristol. The body of a 52-year-old man was found at a property in Crates Close in the early hours of the morning. A woman has been arrested and is being questioned about the death. Plans have been announced to appoint an executive who will take responsibility for trying to create new jobs at Watchet in Somerset. The local council is applying for funds to help pay for a salary for 3 years. The town has one of the worst unemployment problems in the county. Sport now, and the big football match in the West today was Bristol City's game against Cardiff at Ashton Gate. The police were out in some force as supporters were escorted into the ground, ready for the 12 o'clock kick-off. But the influx, combined with roadworks on the Cumberland Basin, caused long traffic tailbacks. On the pitch itself, fans saw an entertaining game which ended in a 0-0 draw. Bristol City had to battle to retain their unbeaten home record after having one player sent off. Alistair Bruce Ball reports.
City's 10th draw in 13 starts at Ashton Gate this season, but a well-earned point, having played all of the second half with 10 men. Midfielder Brian Tinian sent off at the end of the first half for foul and abusive language after City had a seemingly good goal disallowed for a foul on the keeper. It was backs to the wall after that. Cardiff did hit the bar, but Ivan Testamatanu almost won it for Bristol City with a diving header in the dying seconds. It finished Bristol City 0, Cardiff City 0.
Their keepers made a couple of terrific saves before we scored the goal. Which was a goal. Now the linesman gets involved for some reason, and the annoying thing is that the referee's 5 yards away, the linesman's 40 yards away, and you know that the referee's not strong enough to go off his own back. I think video evidence now shows that Steve's not touched the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper's flapped the bit. It's just dropped for Ivan, who scored a terrific goal. You know that's the first annoying thing, and then from there Brian goes over, gets involved with the linesman, and you know we get reduced to 10 men.
Tony Pulis. We'll now look at the weather forecast, and we've had a fair bit of sunshine today, but a cold night is in prospect. There'll be a widespread frost across the west, with temperatures right down to -4 in places. Tomorrow will be bright at first, but it will become cloudy as the day goes on, and it will still be quite cold at about 8 degrees with the winds freshening. Well, don't forget, we'll have a full roundup of the sport on News West tomorrow, including a look at why worn-out pitches have plunged the famous Bristol Downs League into a crisis. Has the league outgrown the Downs? That's tomorrow at 6:30 in the evening. But that's it for now. Until tomorrow, I'll say goodbye. Back in the morning, starting at 6:25. Hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
Alice Beers at the helm on BBC Two in just over 5 minutes at The Boat Show.
Blast off tonight at 6 with Tom Hanks.
Houston, we have a problem.
In Apollo 13.
I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Work stresses rise in casualty at 8:10.
So he has to kill somebody before anyone takes action.
This is a tough job for professionals.
We're supposed to be a caring profession. Let me go!
And in Second Sight at 9, Clive Owen is a homicide detective.
Murder inquiries are a marathon, not a sprint.
With more than a murder on his mind.
You're going blind.
I have a problem with my eyes. I'm dealing with it, all right?
With musical highlights from the Millennium Party at 10:45. Tonight on BBC One.
People say, Paul, you're an erudite man about town, seeking all that's fascinating in contemporary arts, tracking down top live performances and hip, funky sounds. Recently, I've discovered Beckett Unbound and a Balinese gentleman knocking the stuffing out of a very big gong. Friends opine, what wonderful evenings out, Paul, but what hard work. And I must admit, I find it all very taxing.
Evenings on BBC Radio 3. Worth staying in for.
So now on BBC One, Songs of Praise with Steve Chalk.